incidences. Our speakers are Professor Roger Ennis, Department of Biology, Indiana University, Professor Yasin Dagadas, Group Leader, Gregor Mendel Institute of Molecular Plant Biology, and Mary Williams, Features Editor at ASPB. Our moderators are myself, Indrani Barwa, postdoctoral research associate at USDA, Lakshmi Sethi, the senior scientist at the Division of Plant Biology, and Alice Pierce, who is a PhD candidate with UC Davis. Next slide. Just a short introduction on myself. I'm Indrani. I'm a postdoc research associate at Berg facility at USDA ARS Maryland in USA. I'm working on plant pathogen interactions currently, and I'm really privileged to host this webinar, as this is a topic which is very close to my heart, as I was personally affected by the pandemic. With that, I would like to introduce our first speaker without taking much time. Next slide, please. Our first speaker is Professor Roger Ennis. He's a distinguished professor at the Department of Biology, Indiana University. He holds the class of 1954 professorship in biology at Indiana University, as I said. He received his PhD in molecular, cellular, and developmental biology at the University of Colorado Boulder, and completed his postdoc research at UC Berkeley, where he developed Arabidopsis as a model system for studying plant microbe interactions. He's been associated with American Association for the Advancement of Science and American Academy of Microbiology, and is also the immediate past president of the International Society of Molecular Plant Microbe Interactions. He's also served as president of the North American Arabidopsis Steering Committee. With this, I would like Dr. Ennis to take over and please present his slides. Thank you.
Thank you for the introduction, Indrani. It's really an honor for me to be here. And so this is totally new for me to be talking about this kind of topic. Did not have any slides prepared ahead of time to talk about mental health. But it was really interesting exercise for me to go back and think actively about how I deal with these sorts of issues and how I apply what I've learned over the course of my career to helping run my lab and helping the folks in my lab deal with mental health challenges. So let me start by sharing my screen. And there we go. Hopefully you all are seeing a photo of a subgroup of my lab there. So this is part of my team from last week, the fall outing in southern Indiana. All the leaves have turned colors. Beautiful day out. But this gives me a chance to talk about first one of the issues that all of us faced during the pandemic, which was social isolation and the importance of having social interactions, especially in-person interactions, which we now thankfully are all back to. But part of maintaining our proper mental health for me, absolutely, and I think this is true for everyone, is just having a chance to talk to others and share our happiness and our challenges with others, and do so both in formal settings and informal settings. So anyway, I was asked to talk on this, and then my first response when I was asked to talk about it was, I have no expertise whatsoever in this topic. Why are you asking me? But the host insisted that I could share just from my own personal experiences, and so that's what I'm going to do. So I thought I would start with me and how I have survived challenges over the course of my career, mental health challenges, and then move on to more broadly applying this to how I manage a research lab. So I'm going to go way back to what I consider the most formative aspect of how I deal with mental health challenges. And it actually goes back all the way to high school when I joined the cross-country team. And you might ask, why in the world am I talking about running in cross-country? But for me, individually, the most important way I deal with stress is by going for a run, or else now it's harder for me to run because of bad knees. I go for a hard bike ride, but it's the same idea. Get my pulse up, push my body physically, and miraculously, almost always, my problems seem less overwhelming after a hard run than before. And so where did that running come from? I mean, where have I taken it over the course of my youth, especially. Well, this picture here is a picture from my college cross country team. And I was very fortunate to be on a really great team that had some super outstanding runners, all American runners on it. The guy in the red dots there, if you don't recognize him, that's me. I had a little more hair back in those days. But the way cross country works, if you don't know, is you have a team of 7 runners and they compete against other teams of 7 runners. And then you score by the place that each runner gets in the race, and low score wins. And it's the top 5 runners on the team that compete. And so it's the scores from those top 5 runners. I was the 5th runner, and there's a little lesson there. One is I wasn't the best, and I've never considered myself the best at anything I do, but I really played an essential role in our team being able to win the national championship that year, because that 5th runner spot was absolutely critical to the success of the team. Another lesson from this experience was just how fun it is to work with a team as opposed to just running individually. People often think of running as an individual sport. It absolutely is not. It's key to be able to run with others and share the challenges with others. And then that carries over directly into life and into running a research lab. So what has running taught me? Well, here, this picture is actually a picture of my son, not me, running in the Rocky Mountains. And that's my happy spot too, is running outside, running in a wild place. And it's there in those places that my mind is free to do free association, get creative, and especially figure out how to solve problems. So it's taught me it's a fantastic stress release. I know for me, this is how I deal best with stress. It's the place where I almost always have my most creative thoughts. And it's not when I'm sitting at my computer reading something. It's when my mind is free to wander a bit. And especially if I have something that's really challenging me, whether it's a personnel problem or a grant writing problem, you name it. Usually those problems aren't solved when I'm sitting in the office. They're solved when I'm out doing something like this. Other things I learned from running, focusing on positives rather than negatives is an absolute key. And I actually learned that from my high school cross-country coach. He was one of the most successful cross-country coaches in Southern California high school system. The way he coached was not on running technique. It wasn't so much about the workouts. It was all about the mental aspect of the sport. And when he talked about the mental aspect, it was always getting us to focus on the positive aspects of what we were feeling in workouts and not on the negatives. And that absolutely applies in research. Okay, so there's all sorts of analogies. You've probably heard many of these before. I hope this doesn't sound trite to you, but I really take these to heart. So this is a picture that's meant to show that running it's a long distance. It's not a sprint in my case. So it's more of a marathon. That means you need to pace yourself. So if you go too hard all the time, you're going to burn out. Sometimes, though, it gets really tough. If you're running a marathon, that mile 20 to 24, you think you're never going to finish it. But you just have to push through. And when you do, oh boy, you sure feel good about having done it. But all races, all workouts, they do have an end. You get to rest. You get to have that beer at the end of the day. This is, I think, really important in the context of pacing is, yeah, sometimes you have to push really hard. Sometimes you have that grant deadline you've got to get in. Sometimes you have to push to really finish the paper. But there's times to push and times to relax, and you've got to do both. Also, competing is fun. Not everybody out there I know has participated in competitive sports, but it is fun to get your team and try to compete against another team and hopefully win. But one thing you especially learn when you run is that there's always somebody better than you. And that's absolutely true in research too. You're always going to find somebody smarter than you, somebody's experiments who work better, somebody who gets the answer before you got it. But that's okay. That's the nature of competition. And then you just go on to the next race, the next paper, whatever. And you absolutely do not dwell on any sort of failure because that is just counterproductive. So again, competition is fun, but don't get hung up on it when you don't win. What really matters, though, is that you are improving your own times in the context of running. In the context of research, it means you're moving forward and finding something new. And perhaps most importantly, running's a lot easier and more fun when you have someone to talk to. This particular picture here is my daughter and my wife running together, having a great conversation. But if you do run or cycle or whatever, you probably know how much faster the miles go by when you're having a good conversation while you're doing it. It's also true when you're doing science. And it's also just really fun to work together. And for me now in science, the fun part absolutely every day is just talking to the folks in my lab and discussing the results and working up new ideas for next steps in the science. It's a team project. It's not a single effort. So how to coach a team of scientists. So here is pretty much my full science team from last summer. We had some summer visitors too, so it's a little bit bigger than it is on a day-to-day basis. But many of the things that I apply to how I mentor the folks in my lab, I actually learned in high school and college cross country. So first of all, your job as a lab head, if you're a lab head, or you're going to be one, um, is to help the members of your lab be successful. It's not to tell them what to do. It's not to crack the whip on them and get them to do what you want them to do. It's all about helping them be successful for whatever they're trying to accomplish. And if they have success, you're going to have success. And in that context, you always have to be focusing on the success of the lab members, not their errors. The last thing a hardworking scientist, especially early career scientist, needs to hear is they screwed up and it was their fault. That's, everybody's trying to be successful, and something that doesn't go right, they need some help to figure out how to make it go right. And when things go well, they need to be able to celebrate that. Another thing that I always emphasize with everybody in the lab is that solving problems is actually fun. Even when your PCR doesn't work, figuring out why it didn't work, that can be fun when you have success. You got to celebrate those little successes. Yeah, stay engaged in your lab members' projects. Get excited about their discoveries. That's where motivation comes from. Motivation doesn't come from guilt. It doesn't come from being told you have to work harder. It comes from being excited about coming in the lab and making a new discovery. So that's how to motivate a team. Also, I found it's really important to just generally, as a coach, be available for spontaneous conversations. Keep your office door open. Don't require appointments for somebody to drop in and talk to you. And then be open to the conversation. Be non-judgmental. You want to be a resource for the people in your lab. So you want to be a good listener. So listen first, find out what the challenges your students are facing are, and help them solve the problem. Don't tell them how to solve the problem. And then especially know that every scientist has self-doubts. Even I have self-doubts. Even today, I have self-doubts. I certainly had self-doubts about putting this thing together. But your job is to help your team members overcome that imposter syndrome that everybody has, and just point out that they belong. Okay, and then last slide here, just some tips for me. Again, I'm not a professional here, but tips for me that work for staying positive during stressful times. So first of all, that picture is my wife and my grandson. And the take home from the picture is hang out with people that bring joy to your life. And these are two people that do that for me. But other important tips here, identify negative feedback loops and short circuit those. That's a real issue with mental health, and was a real issue with what we were facing during the pandemic. There's so much negative news out there, and it was so easy to get into these hopeless feelings of hopelessness. And so you have to identify those loops and then just cut them somehow. Part of doing that is minimizing the time spent thinking about problems that are out of your control. Turn off the news, stop the news feed. At times that's necessary to do. But there may be problems that you can help have an impact on. If there are, it feels good to take action. So if there's a chance you can have a positive impact and it will energize you to act on them, do it. Avoid sources of negativity, though. Sometimes there's just people in your life that are hard to avoid, that are just negative all the time. They sap your energy. Do what you can to avoid people like that and sources that sap your energy. Obviously, cultivate positive relationships with friends. Humans are social animals. Avoid isolation. And that's where the pandemic really created issues, was it isolated many of us. And then lastly, don't be afraid to seek professional help. That's been absolutely essential for many folks I've had in my lab over the years. The professionals can help you work through problems, and if you need medications, help rebalance brain chemistry when that needs to be done. So that is really all I wanted to cover right now. I know we need some time for Q&A after this, so I will stop right there. And thank you for listening.
Thank you, Dr. Ines. I hope I'm audible. Yeah, it's a really interesting talk, and thank you for the time. Taking running as a tool for self-care and self-improvement, it was really good. And also how to build a community, and most importantly, what not to do while building a community. That's great. Thank you. We'll again have your views during the question and answer session. So let's have the next slide, please. So coming back, let me take a moment to introduce myself. I'm a Plantae Fellow 2022 and 2023. I'm working as a scientist in the Indian Agriculture Research Institute, and my work is majorly on nitrogen use efficiency of cereal crops. I'm 1.5 decade into research and have mentored few students. Definitely this seminar is going to help me work better and work with my students in a better way, I'm sure. Now we have a very illustrious speaker coming up. Let's have the next slide, please. That's Dr. Yasin Dagdas. So Yasin is from Turkey, and he completed his PhD under Dr. Nick Talbot in University of Exeter. Then he proceeded on with to work in under Dr. Sophie Camon in Sainsbury Laboratory. And now he is a group leader at Gregor Mendel Institute in Vienna. Personally, I came across Dr. Yasin during the lockdown when he had coordinated a autophagy seminar series, which was really useful during that stressful times to listen to research. So let us have Yasin talk now. Dr. Yasin, please.
Thanks. Thank you very much. Let me see if I can share the screen. Okay, so first of all, I would like to also thank the Plantae Fellows, Lakshmi and Indrani, for inviting us, and Mary thinking of us as suitable candidates. We certainly have, at least I certainly have my issues of mental health, so I guess it's a good fit to be a part of this seminar series and think about this. As Roger mentioned, I am in no way also an expert on the topic, and when I was trying to read and think about it, there are tons of resources online that are available. But what I try to do is kind of make discuss about the things that works for me or that helps me in terms of self-care and community care. And so I kind of think of it as 3 layers. So obviously there's a very important aspect of self-care that is involved. And then in terms of community care, I think there are 2 layers of this. One of them is our local communities where we are based, whether this is the university or research institution, and then our scientific community, which we belong to, which could be, multiple communities that we belong to during our research. And I think these are all somehow connected, and we need to have a positive influence on all these aspects to be able to eventually have our own self-care and mental health and balance working out okay. And I'll just try to talk about things that works for me for each of these categories, or I try to work on each of these categories. For the self-care, I think what is really important, and especially this is more important for maybe early career researchers, is first of all, setting expectations. If you are working with your, PhD supervisor or postdoctoral mentor, or you are a supervisor that you are kind of working with people, I think it is really, really crucial to be able to set common expectations and communicate these clearly. A lot of the issues, because I was also a part of the PhD training unit here, that I see when I talk to students, especially students that are having issues with their supervisors or with their mentors, is that they don't communicate these expectations clearly. You know, what are your expectations from your PhD? What are your expectations from your postdoctoral training time? And these needs to match with whoever you are working with. I think that is something really important, and that solves actually a lot of the issues, because on a daily basis, you are interacting with your supervisor or mentor. And if you are kind of on different pages, that creates a lot of friction, and then that creates a lot of stress on on yourself. For me, and this, I would kind of die for it. For me, this is the major or main source of unhappiness in academia, is we compare ourselves with others too much. I mean, in a way, the system is built to be able to somehow compare yourself, but we should almost actively, constantly work on this, that we stop comparing ourselves with others. We all have different starting points. We will all have different endpoints. We also live our lives while trying to kind of continue our professional activities. And when you try to compare yourself with others, you will always find ways to make yourself miserable. I think we should be able to kind of be content with our achievements. We should be able to kind of be happy with what we achieve in our kind of professional activities. And as much as we can stop comparing ourselves with others, we will be more we will find a lot more reasons to be happy and kind of content and satisfied with our professional development. And this is not something that you could solve immediately. This will require constant kind of reinforcement, self-reinforcement, and self-reminders that, okay, you know, this is kind of not really helpful. Okay, somebody could be achieving, and we may be thinking that, you know what, you know, I deserve to achieve those things as well. But there is no way we will be able to know those, let's say, what that person has gone through, or what our starting point or that person's starting point is. One thing that really helps me, and I think this is a problem because so the students that we have in academia are generally higher achievers. You know, they didn't have problems in their academic educations. They always had A's or the best grades in their lives. And they kind of think that they will be able to do everything themselves. But when you get into science, first of all, you are bound for failure, right? So most of the things that we do will fail. In a way, that is a good thing, because that shows that we are kind of trying to discover something that is not known, or trying to push the boundaries. And if we now try to do everything on our own, that is going to create a lot of stress and tension. There is absolutely no shame in asking help. It doesn't make us look weak. It doesn't make us look less than what we are. And one thing I'm really proud of, and there aren't that many things that I'm proud of, is that I always ask for help. I mean, when I was writing my job application, which landed me this job, I met with Mary a few months ago, and I immediately sent my application to her, thinking that, you know, she is obviously really, she has done a lot of editing. She knows a lot of kind of how these things are work. So I should just ask for help, even though our kind of interaction was not that kind of, you know, I didn't know her on a daily basis, but I was like, I will ask for help, because that may help increasing my chance of getting the job. And the same is true today. I would go and ask for help from any colleague that I think could help us getting there what we want to achieve. And I don't think this kind of makes me look weak or makes me look less successful, etc. At the end, the goal is there, and I would like to achieve that goal with as little stress as possible. And the other thing that I think, you know, this is somehow connected is, as Roger mentioned, we are social animals. We cannot operate in isolation. What you want to do, and I think this is really important, especially for sustainable mental health, is to surround yourself with colleagues that care about you, to kind of support you when you need help, but also that care enough to criticize you, because you want to have colleagues that you know that you can lean on, whether, you know, this is kind of getting advice on, you know, research related things, getting advice on how to run teams, getting advice on how to run a lab. But I feel these days we are missing this critical feedback. We kind of became too soft on each other, and we don't really kind of tell the hard things sometimes, and that costs us a lot of energy, that costs us a lot of time, that costs us a lot of resources. If you have these colleagues that will help you and that will try to, because it comes from a good heart, good point, you will not be offended with these things, but you will appreciate the time and energy they spend to help you and criticize you. And the other thing I think we forget a lot is we think that, if we work more and more, we will achieve more. But I think, as Roger much better explained, this is a long kind of marathon. This is not a sprint, and we have to have fun. You cannot just keep doing the kind of, boring things that you have to do. You need to find ways to have fun. And for me, for example, this would be going and talking to the people in the lab, or having a scientific discussion with some people that I know will have some exciting things to say about the things that we are thinking about or the projects that we are struggling about. And for this, there is this book. If you haven't read, this is a really fun book. And there's also a YouTube video from John Cleese on creativity. And he basically says, if you are not having fun, if you are not in that mental state that you are kind of playing, you will not be creative. I think Roger very nicely mentioned that, there will be times where we need to sit down and finish projects, etc. But when we are at the creative phase of our projects and our lives, and there should be always some of that, we have to have some fun. Otherwise, it becomes kind of you close yourself and you don't really think creatively, and you can't also keep doing the boring things for a long time. For the local community, I think it is really important that we care about the colleagues around ourselves, because this also, what goes around comes around kind of thing. If we care about others, they will care about ourselves. And just asking, how are you? Because this was something that you don't necessarily see in professional environments all the time. That, I think, will have a simple question, could have a really positive impact. And we need to show that we care about our colleagues. And it is also true when we have discussions on projects, or when we have one-on-ones. I try to start with just asking, how are you? Is everything okay? How are you feeling? Because that is also the human thing to do, right? We are not robots. We are interacting with each other, and we want to make sure that people around us are happy, healthy, and if there is anything that we can help them, we should do that. And the other thing, we talk a lot when I read about mental health, well-being, etc., and the word satisfied comes a lot, because many of the things, when you choose your next job, when you choose your next career move, etc., people try to boil it down to satisfaction. And I think for being satisfied with the job that you are doing, you really want to contribute to the environment that you are at. It could be at various levels. If you are in a leading position, you should contribute, in different ways. But everyone at an organization can contribute positively. I'm sure you know this story about Kennedy asking the kind of cleaners at NASA, what are you doing? And they are like, okay, we are trying to go to the moon first. And he says, okay, we will achieve this. Like, at every level, we can contribute, and we need to contribute, because that is an important part of being satisfied with our jobs. The other thing, and I beg you to do this, be the colleague that spreads positivity. Don't be a Walter White. And sorry for the Breaking Bad reference here. There are colleagues that are constantly spreading negativity. There are colleagues that complain about everything, and that is not helping them or anyone around them. We are all struggling. Everyone has struggles, but we could try to spread positivity and have a positive influence in our communities. And for me, this is kind of really crucial, that we could train ourselves. I don't believe kind of the idea that some people have no problems at all. They are just better at hiding them. But if you spread positivity, that will also influence us positively. And finally, and I think this is really crucial, especially at early career stage as well, is that we need to learn to speak up. We should not tolerate bad behavior or bad kind of manners in our local communities at all. And these days, maybe especially early career researchers don't realize it that much, but you have incredible power to change the places that you are. You just need to speak up, and you can be sure, 100% sure, that people will listen. If they don't listen, you have other venues to speak up, and that will make them listen anyways. And finally, for the scientific community, so we are in a very serious job. So we are trying to produce knowledge that will stand the test of the time, right? So this is a very serious endeavor, and this is not something that we can take lightly. So there are things that we can, we can be light, but in terms of our scientific goal or the professional goal, this is a serious job. And this reminds me of this quote from Jack Monod that, if we are self-satisfied, if we are not pushing ourselves, this is kind of the end of the road for us. But this is also true for our communities. And he is not really trying to put stress on anyone, but he is just trying to make us realize that struggle or stress, anxiety is a part of this process. We are trying to discover things that haven't been discovered before, and that will come with a lot of stress because we want to kind of discover truth. We want to discover, produce knowledge. So that is something that we should always remind ourselves. An inherent part of our jobs will involve some level of stress and anxiety. In terms of kind of communities, I think it is really essential that we don't compromise on scientific endeavor, scientific rigor, because the health of our scientific communities will depend on this. A community that is built on flaky, wishy-washy science will not be kind of sustainable for a long time. And imagine if you are investing your career into that kind of research questions and ideas, you will just waste your time. And I have seen in my short, kind of relatively short scientific career, a lot of examples of this. If we compromise on scientific rigor, it will hurt the whole community. And we should kind of defend our scientific community and the rigor of our community fearlessly. I think it is really important, and it will again feedback positively to our mental health and well-being, is to share, be open about our ideas, share resources and materials, and create this transparency and openness in our scientific communities. And you can be certain that if you have a positive influence like this, your colleagues will follow. So it's kind of, it will create a positive feedback loop, and it will help everyone. Another thing, and even if you are selfish, this is really, really important, is to welcome others into your community and kind of try to build a community that gets bigger and bigger. As I said, even if you are kind of very selfishly strategic, if only 3 people cares about the research that you do, your impact will be always limited. But if you could make that 300 or 3,000, then you will have much better chance of getting, better papers, getting better grants, getting better recognition, etc. So it is almost a major part of our jobs is to kind of build communities. And for that, we need to welcome people that are interested in our line of research. And finally, and this I will not kind of say it in the kinder way, in our scientific communities, we should not tolerate parasites. What I mean by this is, if people are not playing nice, we should put them on spot. And we should make it clear to them that this is not a community that we tolerate, bad behavior, that we tolerate not sharing resources, that we tolerate cutting corners in terms of scientific integrity, etc. And as I said, I think this is important because, first of all, we have a important responsibility towards our science, but also as a community, this is the only way to kind of grow a sustainably healthy community. With this, I'll finish here and thank again the fellows that organized this session, and happy to take any questions that you may have.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Dr. Dagdas, for this wonderful and very insightful presentation. I was taking notes while you were talking. We really appreciate you being here and sharing your wisdom with us. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me. My name is Alice. I'm a third-year plant biology PhD candidate at UC Davis, and I'm also a 2023 Plantae Fellow. I study how intern architecture affects chromatin biology, and I also did my undergrad at UC Davis in plant biotechnology, studying introns. This topic is very dear for me. Life is hard. Research can be really hard. So the way I self-care and try to engage with my community is that I participate in K through 16 outreach, and it's really wonderful, to build those connections with the future scientists. And I also like making digital art. It is my absolute pleasure to introduce Mary Williams. Mary Williams received her PhD from Rockefeller University, and she did a postdoc at Berkeley, was a professor at Liberal Arts College for 13 years, and there she discovered her love for teaching and mentoring. She joined the staff of the Plant Cell in 2009, and she first developed the Teaching Tools in Plant Biology series. She started working with Plantae Fellows and assistant features editors. She's also the PI for the NSF-funded Root and Shoot grant, and where she helps early career scientists navigate their challenging and uncertain careers. However, she also struggles to balance the demands of too many projects and her own self-care. Fortunately, she has a family and a dog who entice her away from her computer occasionally. With that, please take it away, Mary.
Well, thank you so much. Oh dear, let's see. See if I can remember how to use Zoom. Here we go. Well, I really enjoyed the first two talks. They were great, and I wanted to frame this. Well, first of all, I was asked to speak for 10 minutes, and I couldn't fit the self-care in around the community care, which is sort of a little story of my life. But anyway, I wanted to say what I wanted to say. And I wanted to kind of frame this about why is there this great need for self-care and community care, as well as some of the things we can do about it. And so I'm starting with this little sort of ideal, that we're all taught as small children. Oh, if you work hard, you can achieve your goals. And, the truth is it's a great way to get kids to do their homework, but it's not entirely true. People often think of academia as sort of a Ponzi scheme or a pyramid scheme. And essentially, there's one person on top who has all the power, much of the salary, all the glory, gets invited to give all the talks, and that's the professor or the PI. So of course, many people say, that's where I'm heading, that's where I want to be. But the truth is that person is resting on the work of a lot of other people, the early career people. And those are the people I spend a lot of time with, discussing and trying to help early career scientists deal with the incredibly stressful life they have ahead of them, particularly when you consider the fact that only about 10 to 15% of PhDs get into tenure track professorships. So it's a very, very challenging commitment that people make when they start to pursue a PhD and work towards higher education. So I just want to acknowledge that. I made a little cartoon, remember this meme from Star Wars? Anakin says, oh, so you want to be a professor? And Padme says, yes, I can work hard. And then she gets that sort of knowing, cynical look from Anakin, and she goes, that's enough, right? No, I'm afraid the story is not true. Working hard is not sufficient. And that's, I think, the thing that really bothers me, and that I'm working to address. I'm sure you've seen this T-shirt that says question authority. So I've sort of edited it to say question meritocracy. And the idea is that, we have this myth of meritocracy, that the people who reach the highest pinnacles are the ones who deserve it, who've earned it, who are the smartest, who are the cleverest, who have, the greatest IQ or whatever. And the truth is that is not entirely the case, present company accepted, because in fact, there are persistent systemic biases that affect whether or not someone can be successful academically. And these are beyond someone's IQ or willingness to work hard. And I think the thing that really struck me, the statistic that I think is the most vividly representing this, is the fact that nearly a quarter of tenure track faculty have a parent with a PhD. And that is so far above the national average of people with parents with PhDs. It really shows that factors beyond your control have a huge influence on your career trajectory. And so I want to talk a little bit about some of those. This comes from this report, but I want to come back to this in a minute. But when you think about it, educational attainment is a function of so many things: access, information, motivation, affordability, academic preparation and support, social support and integration, and professional development. So again, keep that in mind. We'll come back to that in a minute when we start talking about ways of remedying some of these things. But again, there are many social factors beyond your control that influence how you're going to proceed with your career. The other thing I want to point out is that individual biases also contribute to academic achievement. And here you can see I've edited the t-shirt again, and now it says question objectivity. And we like to think of ourselves as scientists as being objective. I can look at some data and I can make a decision about whether the difference is real or not. But when it comes to people, we are very bad at that. And there's tons of data that show us this. I experienced this personally when I was a postdoc. I was on the phone with a collaborator, and we were talking about a project we were working on, and I said, "Oh, by the way, I'm going to be a mother. I'm going to have a baby in December." And there was this long pause, and then my collaborator said, "I thought you were a serious scientist," and hung up the phone. And that really affected me because I was a serious scientist. I am a serious scientist, but and I know he wouldn't have said that if the man had said, "I'm going to be a father," right? And I really hit me hard that this factor, this bias determined that suddenly I was no longer a serious scientist because I chose to have a child. And that is a persistent bias in academia, as well as many other jobs, but particularly in a very competitive environment like academia. Here's another piece of data that shows similarly this gender bias. CVs were sent out that were identical, and in some had a male name, some had a female name, and people rated the male CVs higher than the female. That's again showing that there's a bias, ongoing bias, that people think they're objective, but they're clearly not. Similarly, when the CVs went out with Anglo names versus non-Anglo, like Bill versus Jose, you saw the same skewing towards the Anglo names being preferred. So what can we do about it? Oh, so that last cartoon shows you that we think we can measure things, but we don't actually. We're not very good at objectivity when it comes to each other. So essentially, when people are told both implicitly and explicitly that they don't belong, they're more likely to leave. When we look at the demographics and we see people leaving academia, some people say, "Oh, they left because they weren't good enough." But generally, that's not the case. Generally, people like me say, "You know what? You don't want me anyway. I'm going to go find something that fits me better." So luckily, I found this fantastic opportunity to work at a primarily undergraduate institution with a focus on teaching and mentoring. Had 14 blissful years there, really found the right place for me. And so, that's often what happens to people. And then this other cartoon shows you it's incredibly hard to become a successful faculty member, but it's just more difficult for some people than the others. And this middle cartoon, that's what happens if you do a Google image search for cartoon professor. So this is what, Google and the world around us and AI thinks a professor is. So now I want to get back to what are we going to do about it? Really, what we want to do is we want to try and learn what are these biases that differentially filter people based on their identities, and how can we address them. So you've probably seen this cartoon, which defines equality, where everybody gets the same resources. Equity is where you think about what is the outcome we want. And in a model of equity, we say we want everyone to see over the fence. So one person gets 2 boxes and one doesn't need a box. That's great, but there's an even more powerful way we can think about that, and that is justice. And in justice, you ask yourself, why is the fence there? And if the fence has a purpose, which in this case, maybe it does, maybe it keeps the ball from, rolling off the field, but maybe that fence doesn't have to be opaque, that blocks some people from being able to see. So that's, I think, where I've tried to go with my career, is trying to think about, why are some people finding it, easier to walk this difficult path than others? So that's where I think the roles of professional societies really come in. So when I was invited to develop the teaching tools in plant biology and I started working with the professional society, I really saw that this is a place where we could have a big impact across organizations, and really try and address some of these issues that people face in their careers. And again, if you look at this list of things that are contributing to educational attainment, these are things that professional societies can help, or professional organizations can help people access, like networking and all that, right? So I want to briefly tell you a little bit about some of the things that ASPB, as well as many other professional organizations, Joanna's here and asked this, many of the same programs can do to help support early career researchers. And just briefly, I'm involved in the Assistant Features Editors Program, the Plantae Fellows Program with Alice, Lakshmi, and Indrani. I also want to point out there's a travel award application deadline due tomorrow for early career women, as well as other dates later in the month. So professional societies are fantastic places we can help to try and deal with some of these community care issues. And finally, I just wanted to mention that there's an even bigger project which spans across multiple professional societies, which is this NSF-funded Root and Shoot project, with the specific goals of advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and creating culture change, specifically to remove barriers that differentially filter people. And a couple things that we're doing with that project. One of the things we've done is we've really focused on training the leaders of plant science organization. Again, we've got Yasin and Roger here, who are, brilliant, wonderful people, very community minded, but many people don't see the challenges that people who aren't like them see. And so helping people to recognize that there are these problems in our community that need to be addressed has been a big part of where we've started. And then one of the projects that we're just launching in November is we're developing a working group to help train mentors to be more culturally responsive and better mentors. So we heard a lot from great mentors about how they go about it. But if you're a student or a postdoc who has a not so good mentor, you can have a real problem. So we think that addressing mentoring in general is going to really go a long way towards community care. And that's all I have to say, and I'd be very happy to take any questions as well.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Mary, for that presentation. It was wonderful. So now we're going to go into our Q&A session. We have about 10 minutes. So we asked speakers so we're going to let one of you all answer the question, and if you can keep it short and to the point, that would be awesome. And Indrani will be moderating this Q&A session.
Thank you, Mary, and thank you, Alice. So we have around 10 minutes for our Q&A. So I'll quickly direct our first question. Whoever is willing to answer this, any of your speakers can go ahead and answer it. The question is, getting help from a mental health professional can sometimes be difficult. Where should we turn to try and help ourselves with negative loops and other mental health issues besides finding a professional?
I can jump in there a little bit. Again, recognizing I don't have any expertise here specifically, but many of the universities now in the US especially have really upped their resources for addressing mental health issues. So Indiana University, where I'm at now, has a virtual, essentially, access to a group of therapists who can quickly direct you to additional resources that may help you with whatever challenge you have, or may just simply be somebody you can talk to. And then that wasn't available a year ago. But I think Indiana University is not alone in that way in putting together working with external mental health professional providers and making them accessible to the students. In our case, both undergraduates and graduate students at the university. So one thing is take a quick look to see what you might have access to, and it may well be new. And so definitely dig into local resources with whatever company, university you're associated with, because that is improving. And then, of course, the others would be, just reaching out to your own network of friends, and you may be surprised how many people have the same challenges and have found other resources that you might not know about. So those are the first two things that come to my mind.
And maybe I could just add, I think when we reach out to our colleagues, for example, people that are 2 years ahead of us in their PhDs or 2 years ahead of us in their careers, etc., you very quickly realize a lot of the issues that we are facing, they had exactly same issues, same problems. So it really helps to talk to those people and form these peer networks, which could become transformative, because then you have your allies already formed, and then you talk to people that are having exactly same issues that you are having with. That also feels you more confident that you are kind of not the imposter, but this is just the nature of the business.
Thank you, Dr. Enes and Dr. Yassin. The next question is directed to Dr. Yassin directly. It says, when you say surround yourself with colleagues that care enough to criticize you, I think I am hearing find yourself a professional network of caring and honest people. Did you cultivate this actively, or did it come from years of having colleagues?
You, I think, have to cultivate it actively, and I still keep colleagues. I know, for example, some from my postdoc time, some from my PhD times that I know will be critical, but in a positive way. But also, I was thinking when I said that, when you make decisions, it is not necessarily the most fancy place or the most kind of glamorous place that you want to go to, but you want to choose that place based on the colleagues that you will have, because you want to spend your, maybe 5 years, maybe 20, 30 years. And if you don't have supportive colleagues, you will have really hard time kind of keeping yourself mentally healthy.
Thank you, Dr. Yassin. So our next question is, any one of you can answer. I think Mary should answer this one. How do we balance our personal life along with scientific results?
Oh, that's hard. I think you take the long game. I think that was one of Roger's things. There are times when it's horrible. I'm going to tell you my anecdote that I often share, which is my first year as a professor. When I was teaching classes I'd never taught before, and I had a son who was 2 or 3. And we were playing cards one evening after work, and I made a stupid mistake, because he asked me for an 8, and then I asked him for an 8, and he realized I wasn't paying attention. And he threw his cards down and he stormed out of the room, and he said to me, "Mom, if you're not even going to pay attention to me when you're playing with me, then don't even bother." And he slammed his door. And that was such a horrible moment, but it really made me realize that, like, okay, I have to have some boundaries, right? There has to be taking care of my family, which is so important to me, and taking care of work. And so really, I learned to be incredibly efficient with my time. I don't waste a moment when I'm working, and then I try as much as I can to put it away and, leave the computer behind. But it's a difficult, hugely difficult challenge.
Thank you, Mary. Our next question is pretty interesting. I think if each one of you could give your opinion on this. How can we create environments for ourselves and our community that promote self-care, well-being, and growth?
I think, so maybe if I could quickly start. So first of all, we need to kind of show people that we appreciate when they take time off, or, don't say those kind of idiotic comments that Mary got when, she was talking to our collaborators. And also don't be shy to say people that, hey, I'm taking off, I need to go spend time with the kids, or, whatever the fun activity that we are having with. Making sure that no one gets, any judgment whatsoever when they take care of themselves in whatever the form they are doing. And as soon as we see people that are judging others, we basically tell them to shut up.
Yeah, I will just build on that. I mean, leading by example is something that's really critical as a lab mentor, in that, I do take holidays. I take time to be with my family. I take time to go hiking in the mountains, and I come back and share slides and make it clear that this is an important part of life. And I encourage my students, when they go off and do something fun, to share a few slides when they come back. because people enjoy that. It builds a little bit of community, but it also makes it clear that, yeah, we're expected to take time off and have some fun.
Yep. And I think if we only value, grant dollars and nature papers in science, I mean, that's the culture I was living in, back at Berkeley. And it means that the horrible people, the really awful, selfish, horrible people rise to the top. And so we have to decide. I think someone said this, I think maybe Yasin said it, we do have some power about the culture we live in. And if we say, we value people who balance their life, we value people who are honest. We value conversations like this, talking about the fact that it's hard. We don't win all the time. Those are not conversations I heard when I was an undergraduate. I only heard, only the stars rise to the top and everyone else fails, right? And it's a horrible, horrible culture to ask people to participate in science when that's what we think we value.
Thank you so much for your answers. It looks like we're out of time.
I think we can take in one last question,
One more
Alice.
question? Okay,
Yeah, because
go for
it's
it.
interesting. Yeah. This is the one last question from our audience, and I think, any one of you can choose to answer it. It says, joining a professional society can at times be difficult for graduate students and postdocs that have limited income due to yearly dues. How can an early career scientist ask a professional society for a discount or assistance? I thought this question was important, so I wanted to put it in.
I suppose I should answer that, but it's not anything I have control over. You can ask your PI. Some PIs give gift memberships to their underlings, and I think that's a fantastic thing to do. So if you are a PI, you can invite your students and postdocs at your expense, because we know you make a lot more money than they do. Give them a treat. Happy New Year.
And many societies offer discounts on meeting registration that functionally make the society membership free. And so with the faculty members investing and sending their student to a meeting, or maybe the student won a travel award, then it's a trivial amount of money to throw in the society membership.
Awesome.
Obviously,
Thank you so
Roger
much.
and Mary knows it much better. So I think if you ask for help, you will find it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you everyone who asked questions. I just want to let you know that they're recording, and the Q&A questions, including those that we didn't get to talk to during the live stream, will all be posted in the Plantae website. So, and make sure to keep your eye out for next Plantae's webinar coming up in a few weeks. And again, thank you so much to our distinguished speakers for being here with us today.
Yes, thanks everyone, and hope we'll see you on the next webinar. Have a great rest of your week. Practice